It started like so many great American stories with a handshake. No contracts and headlines, no ribbon cutting ceremony, just two companies, each convinced they'd found the key to the future. On one side, Alco, aka the Old Guard, masters of heavy iron, proud builders of steam locomotives, now watching their empire rust. On the other hand, General Electric, the rising giant of modern technology, supplies everything from turbines to transformers. Together, they saw a chance to rewrite the rules of railroading, to take on the powerhouse that had been running away with the diesel revolution, EMD, backed by General Motors' deep pockets and relentless innovation. In 1940, the deal was simple. Alco would bring the muscle, GE would bring the mind. Mechanical precision meets electrical brilliance. Two halves of one dream, to build the perfect diesel-electric locomotive. And for a moment, it worked. The first locomotives of the Alco-GE alliance rolled out with confidence and chrome, streamlined shells that promised the future. Railroads lined up to see them. Newspapers called them the next evolution of power. But under the shine, cracks were already forming. Because in business, every partnership has two goals: win the market and keep control of the future. That handshake? It didn't just change diesel history. It set the stage for one of the most dramatic betrayals the industry would ever see. By the late 1930s, the railroad industry was standing at a crossroads. Steam still thundered across America, majestic, powerful, and familiar. For more than a century, it had been the heartbeat of the rails. But behind that curtain of smoke and noise, something new was quietly emerging. Diesel. Smaller, cleaner, and far more efficient. It didn't need armies of firemen or endless maintenance. To the executives who watched profit margins shrink during the Depression, diesel was survival. That's where EMD, the electromotive division of General Motors, stepped in. GM had deep pockets, a sharp engineering team, and a clear vision. Their 567 series diesel engine had proven itself on the road and in the yard. Reliable, modular, easy to service. Railroads loved it because it just worked. Meanwhile, Alco, the American locomotive company, was caught between two worlds. Once the king of steam, its factories in Schenectady had built locomotives that powered the nation. But the diesel age moved fast, and Alco struggled to keep up. Their mechanical expertise was undeniable, but diesel engines were a different breed with tighter tolerances, new materials, and complex systems. They needed a partner who could help bridge that technological gap. That partner appeared in the form of General Electric. GE wasn't new to locomotives. They'd been supplying traction motors, generators, and control gear for years, quietly powering other builders' machines from behind the scenes. But GE wanted more than just to supply parts. They wanted to be in the driver's seat, to shape the next chapter of American railroading. So the stage was set. An old powerhouse looking for reinvention, and a rising technology giant eager for control. In a world where EMD's diesels were capturing headlines and contracts, Alco and GE both knew they couldn't win the race alone. Together, maybe, just maybe, they could change the game. And that brings us to 1940, the year it all began. The agreement was straightforward, but the stakes were enormous. In 1940, Alco and General Electric joined forces, announcing a partnership that promised to reshape American railroading. Alco would do what it did best: build the bodies, the frames, the diesel engines themselves. GE would handle the electrics, the traction motors, the generators, the control systems that turned mechanical power into motion. It was a marriage of steel and current, mechanical muscle meeting electrical genius. To the railroads, this was a lifeline. They were desperate for dependable diesel locomotives that could replace aging steam fleets without the risk of unproven technology. EMD had shown what was possible, but the market was still wide open and competition was fierce. The first product of the alliance arrived quickly, the RS-1, introduced in 1941. It was a road switcher, a flexible, all-purpose locomotive that could handle both freight runs and yard duties. It wasn't flashy, but it was practical, efficient, and adaptable. For many railroads, it was their first real taste of diesel power. The RS-1 became a quiet success, setting the tone for what was to come. Then came the FA and FB series, sleek, streamlined locomotives that looked every bit as modern as the era demanded. Underneath the stylish car bodies, Alco's robust engines worked in harmony with GE's advanced electrical systems. These weren't just machines, they were a statement. The Alco-GE alliance could build locomotives that looked good, ran strong, and, on paper, rivaled anything EMD had to offer. For a while, it seemed to work. Orders rolled in, confidence grew, and the partnership began to find its rhythm. GE's electrical expertise gave Alco a new edge, while Alco's manufacturing legacy gave GE the credibility it needed to stand beside the industry giants. But inside that success was a quiet imbalance. GE's technology was becoming more vital with every passing year, and Alco was increasingly dependent on it. The two companies had joined hands as equals, but one of them was already learning how to stand alone. That handshake, meant to unite, had also set the clock ticking. What started as a partnership built on trust and ambition was slowly becoming something else, a rivalry in the making. For a time, everything seemed to fall perfectly into place. The 1940s rolled into the early 50s, and the Alco-GE partnership was firing on all cylinders, literally. Their locomotives were innovative, dependable, and built with a sense of purpose. Alco's mechanical designs had matured, GE's electrical systems were among the best in the world, and together they were producing engines that gave railroads real alternatives to EMD's growing dominance. The railroads noticed. They liked the versatility, the smooth delivery of power, the way GE's electrical gear allowed for better traction and control. Alco-GE units found their way into freight yards, passenger routes, and long-haul service across North America. Each one felt like a statement that EMD didn't own the future just yet. Then came the 244 engine, the new heart of Alco's road locomotives. It was the power plant behind the FA and PA series, engines that looked as good as they sounded. The 244 was meant to prove that Alco could stand toe-to-toe with EMD's famous 567. And in the beginning, it did. On paper, it offered more horsepower, better acceleration, and a sophisticated design. Those years were a golden moment for the alliance. GE's traction motors were as tough as they came, and Alco's styling gave locomotives a visual identity rail fans still remember today. Orders came in steadily, the locomotives performed well in testing, and there was a sense that Alco and GE had finally found the formula. But under the surface, the pressure was building. The race with EMD was unforgiving. Railroads weren't looking for good enough. They wanted flawless reliability, 24 hours a day in all conditions. GE had mastered that balance. Alco and GE were still perfecting it. The partnership looked unstoppable, right up until the 244 started showing its flaws. And when it did, everything began to change. The 244 was supposed to be Alco's comeback. It was their answer to EMD's 567, a bold, modern engine designed to deliver more power from the same footprint. But in their hurry to catch up, Alco skipped the long, painful testing cycles that EMD was famous for. The result was a machine that looked great on launch day, but began to crumble under real-world demands. Almost immediately, problems surfaced. The 244 had chronic reliability issues, oil leaks that wouldn't quit, overheating in summer conditions, and failures when locomotives were pushed hard on mountain grades. Railroad shops complained about constant maintenance, downtime, and unexpected breakdowns. The engines failed publicly, in front of customers, crews, and competitors. GE's electrical systems weren't the issue. They performed flawlessly, but Alco's mechanical troubles tainted the entire brand. To the railroads, an Alco-GE locomotive wasn't a partnership, it was one product. And when it didn't hold up, blame fell on both names. The disappointment hit hard. Railroads that had once bet on Alco-GE began shifting their orders back to EMD, whose 567 kept running mile after mile with the same quiet dependability it was known for. Alco tried to fix the 244's issues, but every patch seemed to reveal something new. For GE, the message was becoming clear. Their reputation for reliability was now tied to someone else's mistakes. And in an industry built on trust and performance, that was a risk they couldn't afford for long. The alliance that had once looked unbreakable was beginning to strain. What had started as a handshake of equals was slowly turning into a struggle for survival, and GE was already thinking about what came next. By the mid-1950s, the alliance that once symbolized strength had turned into quiet tension. On the surface, Alco and General Electric were still partners, still co-branding locomotives, still sharing brochures, still presenting a united front to the railroads. But behind closed doors, something very different was happening. Inside GE's research labs in Erie, Pennsylvania, engineers had begun sketching out a future that didn't include Alco. They were designing a prime mover of their own, a new diesel engine known internally as the FDL series. It was a project born out of frustration. GE's technology had proven solid, but Alco's engines kept dragging down their shared reputation. Every breakdown, every warranty claim, every angry railroad superintendent reflected badly on both names. For GE, that was unacceptable. So, while Alco kept trying to fix its struggling 244 and develop the next generation 251 engine, GE's engineers quietly built the foundations of independence. They studied every locomotive that came through their facilities, what worked, what didn't, and began testing components in secrecy. Officially, they were still Alco's partner. In reality, they were preparing for a clean break. By the late 1950s, the writing was on the wall. GE had the resources, the research, and the ambition to stand alone, and when they finally made their move, it was swift and decisive. The partnership ended. No shouting, no lawsuits, just a quiet severing of ties. GE would now build complete locomotives under its own name. In 1960, the world saw the result, the GE U-25B. Sleek, modern, and powered by GE's own FDL engine. It was everything the railroads had been asking for, reliable, efficient, and built with the lessons learned from 2 decades of collaboration. It was also the ultimate irony. The very electrical systems, design philosophies, and field experience that Alco had helped pioneer were now GE's competitive edge. To the industry, it looked like progress. To Alco, it felt like betrayal. The partner that had once been its greatest strength had just become its fiercest rival, and this time there would be no catching up. Alco never truly recovered. The loss of GE was the end of a lifeline for Alco. Without GE's electrical systems and support network, Alco was left scrambling to fill the gap. They still had skilled engineers, loyal customers, and decades of experience. But the market had changed, and the momentum was gone. Their new 251 engine, introduced in the late 1950s, was everything the 244 should have been. Strong, reliable, and well built. But by the time it was ready, it was too late. The damage to Alco's reputation was already done, and GE and EMD had carved up the diesel market between them. Railroads wanted proven reliability and a solid service network, and both GE and EMD could deliver that in spades. Throughout the 1960s, Alco fought to stay relevant, producing a handful of respectable locomotives powered by the 251, but the orders kept shrinking. GE's U-Series units were everywhere, on main lines, in yards, hauling freight and passengers across continents. The same company that once stood beside Alco was now selling the locomotives that replaced them. In the early 1970s, Alco's locomotive division was a shadow of its former self. The company that had built giants of steam and pioneers of diesel was fading fast, its legacy slowly being absorbed into the past. In the end, that handshake in 1940, the one that promised strength through unity, had become a cautionary tale. What was meant to save Alco had instead accelerated its downfall. The alliance that began with promise ended with betrayal. And the sound of Alco's last engines fading into the distance marked more than just the end of a company. It marked the close of an era in American railroading. For all the talk of engines, horsepower, and competition, there's another part of this story that often gets forgotten: the people who built these machines. In Schenectady, New York, Alco's factory was more like a community. Thousands of machinists, welders, and engineers poured their skill into every locomotive that left those massive brick walls. To them, each unit wasn't a product. It was pride on steel wheels. When the partnership with GE began, optimism was everywhere. Workers felt they were part of something bigger, a comeback story for American steam's proudest name. But when the alliance broke apart, the same optimism turned to uncertainty. Layoffs followed. Departments shut down. The sound of hammering and riveting that once echoed through Schenectady began to fade. Yet, even in decline, there was loyalty. Many railroaders still swore by Alco power. They liked the way those engines pulled, the way they sounded, the way they felt. They weren't perfect, but they had personality. Maybe that's why, decades later, rail fans still chase down surviving Alcos. Because beyond the specs and serial numbers, there's a legacy built on human hands. People who believed in what they were building, right up until the end. Today, the Alco-GE story stands as one of the most dramatic chapters in railroading history. A partnership that built the backbone of early diesel power and then tore itself apart. Many of those locomotives, the RS units and early road switchers, still survive in museums or short-line service. Their faded paint a reminder of when two giants dared to take on EMD together. GE went on to dominate the global locomotive market for decades, while Alco's name slowly slipped into legend. But without that early alliance, the shared blueprints, experiments, and lessons, GE's rise might never have happened. The betrayal that ended Alco also launched a new era of diesel supremacy. It's a story of ambition, innovation, and the cost of trusting the wrong partner. But before we wrap up, let's turn it over to you. What's your memory of them? The first time you saw one, or the last time you heard a 244 or 251 thunder to life? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you love exploring the machines, rivalries, and moments that defined railroading's golden age, make sure to hit subscribe and ring the bell.